4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bylaw and Policy Review Committee meeting for August 11th. I know it was posted for 2 o'clock, and we had another meeting that ran a little over, so we are starting at 10 to 3 here. We have a couple items for reports, and we have the minutes of the previous meetings to review, so looking for a motion or anybody that wants to bring any concerns up. Mr. Palat?
I just make a motion to accept the minutes of the previous minute, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And with that, any discussion? I see none, so all in favor?
Thank
you. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Like I said earlier, we had 2 reports. One is 2.1 Bylaw and Policy Update. And Ms. Karbuszewski, if you would like to take over here, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. The Bylaw and Policy Update report I'm presenting to you today contains updates on 2 bylaws and 4 policies. The 2 bylaws were chosen based on this committee's priorities that were set in December. And just to note, both of these bylaws were passed quite a while ago. The Transportation Offsite Levy back in 2008, and the Water and Sanitary Sewage to Brochu Industrial Park back in 2006. So Bylaw C-1197, being the Transportation Offsite Levy bylaw, is currently being actively worked on by the Engineering Services Department. And they've done quite a bit of background work to get this rolling, including presenting a report at the Strategic Priorities Working Group back in June of 2019, and then presented to UDI in August of 2019. Before anything else can happen, what we're waiting for as administration is the adoption of a new transportation master plan. And this will be coming forward for Council's consideration this month at the August 18th Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting. And the intent is, once Council gets to adopt this new master plan, the Engineering Services Department will prepare amendments accordingly to this particular bylaw, with the expectation that they'll have something prepared for Council's consideration as early as Q1 of next year. Bylaw C-1167, the Water and Sanitary Sewage to Brochu Industrial Park, was adopted back in 2006. And this is unique in itself because the actual local improvement was enacted or initiated by the city. And when it was initiated, it generated a petition to the city to stop the levy or the improvement. And through the petition process, it was determined that it was a sufficient petition. And as a result of that, this bylaw was drafted to identify the liabilities and the risks that were going to be effective as a result. So this particular bylaw stays in place until another opportunity to go into that area and do local improvements is available. And at this time, there are no active proposals to extend water mains and hydrants into Brochu at this time. Okay. The 4 policies being presented are all for the Finance Department, and they were chosen also based on the priorities of this committee. And all 4 do have later dates these 4 policies are as old as 7 years or older. And at this time, with the new CFO in her chair, all 4 policies are currently under review by the Finance Department. And the department anticipates Council seeing revisions as early as Q4 of this year and no later than Q2 of next year. And with that, administration is recommending this committee receive this report for information. I do have Christine Donnelly, the Manager for Engineering Services, and Danielle Whiteway, our CFO, attending this meeting if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Karbushewski. So my team here, any questions, concerns that want to be brought up at this point in time? We have people that can possibly answer those. So, Mr. Paulette?
Thanks, Cheryl. I guess it looks like they're just normal housekeeping, but I'm just wondering on the transportation offsite levy, I think you said Q1 of next year, Arlene. I'm just wondering, I'm assuming this will go through normal consultation with UDI and everything else, so it's just kind of time slotted in then, but normal process would happen as far as all the consultation with industry?
Through the chair, yes, normal consultations will occur, and this, any proposed amendments will come through the appropriate standing committee, and then recommendation for council to move on to council.
Okay, no, appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the clarification. Mayor Given, you're next in queue.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. So I'm just curious about 1167, the Brochu Industrial Park bylaw. So all the others sort of, I appreciate the update sort of saying, hey, here's what this is, and here's when we anticipate some updates happening. This one is different from all the rest because it doesn't have an update about what's happening. So does this mean that administration is recommending that it stay as is, that it be repealed? So just, yeah, the other ones, it's clear to me that some stuff's going to happen. I appreciated the update and the reminder about this one, but it doesn't really tell me what's going to happen with it.
Right.
Thank you, through the chair. So this one stays on the books. We need to keep the bylaw active until such a time that a proposal comes forward to do upgrades in that industrial park. And then again, it would be a local improvement, and processes would be put in place for notification to the appropriate landowners, and that could subsequently cause further petition, perhaps, if or not, and we would at that time act accordingly.
So, Councillor O'Toole, if I could, so just for the other committee members, this was a long time ago. If you actually go through and click through and read the bylaw, there's some really specific policy statements that are in there. And just, to be really clear, I don't think there's a need to change them, but it's worthwhile for us to discuss them because it explicitly states that no subdivision of land is possible. The city will not support subdivision of land within Brochu unless that subdivision comes along with an accompanying plan to add regular city standard water and sewer services. So that's like a policy decision. It also talks about the idea that the city's general tax base won't be in a position to finance. It's the city's policy that we won't use the general tax base to finance water and sewer improvements in that area. So, and again, I'm not advocating that we change that, but I think it's just worthwhile that we note that's the case, because this is the kind of thing where, after a decade or whatever, council may just want to have an opportunity for, to affirm that that's still the case. I don't think we need to take any action to make that affirmation, but we also shouldn't just sort of let this whiz by and say, hey, we don't need to look at the details of this. So, I think this is the role of this committee to say, hey, this thing that was passed a long time ago, is that still how the city council of today thinks?
Fair enough, Mayor Gibbon. I appreciate your past knowledge of this and looking into it. I have Mr. Bressie here, Councillor Bressie.
Great. So I was sitting down reading this bylaw yesterday and really struggling to understand it, actually. And at the risk of asking a dumb question, I've always thought of Brochu as the area around Canadian Tire. Is that not where it is?
No. So I think Brochu is along Highway 43 immediately east of the airport, where the city's pound is, and that area right there. And so it is a former county industrial park. So it was developed to a county, a rural standard, and that's why it has on-site servicing rather than connected to the larger system. And that's why back in the day, there was this, there was a desire to upgrade those services from the city side to do fire flow and all those other things.
Gotcha.
The property owners at the time said, no, we're fine as is. And it's an example of how not having a consistent standard of infrastructure across the region can kind of leave a bit of a patchwork. So this is one area of the city where fire flows aren't there in terms of being able to fight a fire from a hydrant on a corner. So that was sort of a bit of the context of why it ended up the way it was. It was the city annexed an area that was formerly county, was developed to a county standard. There was a discussion about upgrading it to a city standard, and the landowners at the time chose to fight that. And successfully, within their rights. And the city council of the day said, well, that's fine, but the general taxpayer is not going to subsidize upgrading this formerly county area to city standard.
So how is this different than, we had recent conversations about, it's land use district. The land use district that we approved recently where it's rural, it's industrial to a rural standard. And we said that we've never done that in the city, but isn't this an example of that kind of got grandfathered in rather unintentionally? Like, how's it different? How is this different than our current policy to allow similar industrial development?
I'm curious I'm curious what Christine and Horacio would say. I think this is different in that we didn't have a choice. It just sort of came this way to us. I would hope that the city's current policy would set up a transition type of system that would say, when services are available, you will have a plan of how you will connect, where that wasn't in place. But I would defer to Christine and Horacio about the city's rural industrial district.
Ms. Christine Nonley, go ahead.
Through the chair, I think that this exists because at the time, it is zoned as if it is industrial, just like any other industrial within our urban kind of serviced areas. What's occurred with annexation is we've created another zone that is a rural industrial zone, and therefore our zoning restricts what can happen in there. And therefore, if someone came in that rural area, we could apply rural servicing standards, and that would, as far as how they develop on that lot. Whereas in this area, because it was zoned with an urban industrial zoning, the concern is that people would come in and they're permitted to do certain uses, but the services are not there for those uses. And that's why I think that what was done in the past was this bylaw to make sure people were aware of the restrictions in the area and what they could expect if they were to try and develop it to what the zoning would permit. So that was the approach taken with this area, which is different from now what's occurred with annexation. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Galante, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Christine, maybe this is similar to what we're working right now on Hughes Lake for alternative services. So there will be a list of uses for the area, but developers who want to build first there will be able to do alternative services for that area until the utilities are the main lines are in the area, and ultimately they will have to connect. How the utilities will reach the area could be like in brochure be a local improvement, or could be, you know, a city capital, just to encourage development in that area. That could be another method that's been used in other jurisdictions as well. But Hughes Lake is another example of something like what Christine described on the annex areas as well, that may have its particular set of standards. I'm not familiar with all the details right now, but I know that Brian and Christine for sure are working on the alternative services for that area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Given, you're back in the queue. Go ahead.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to ask Councillor Plot's opinion from a development perspective. Like, if Brochu is what it is and it's not going to change, and there's not going to be demand for new uses, like, I'm fine to let things sort of sit. If there was an economic potential in Brochu that we wanted to try to encourage, then maybe we would change the approach. Like, I guess, is there any way that anything would happen in Brochu? Like right now, the restriction on intensification and subdivision and everything else, this bylaw is really specific. We don't support it, and deal with, your services, but is there, from a development perspective, is this land that we should be trying to establish a new vision around to get it to redevelop or to intensify, or like, I don't know.
I mean, for me, I just drove through this the other day, and there's a few vacancies out there like any industrial, but I'd have a hard time thinking how we incentivize that when you have the quarter section sitting next to it with where I guess 7 generations has stopped their building. There's quite a few vacant lots in there that have been purchased and unsold and not started on. There's also quite a few lots in there that have just never been sold. So IGRI, the development company, Wexford, I think they're originally out of New York, and then they work out of, I think it's Calgary. They have ambitions to continue developing here, but they can't get rid of the land they have. So I don't know if it would make sense for us to incentivize trying to do something with Brochu when we've got something new right beside it. The comments I've heard from the guys in Brochu is that they wanted water originally, but Aquaterra, for the cost of water, was just so expensive to actually tie it in that it didn't make financial sense for them to actually even want it. Because they've already got a system that works. Aquaterra would be charging some of these shops up to $50,000 to tie into their system. So financially, I don't see a lot of the businesses in that area wanting it. Unless we did it, they'd hook in, their mill rate would go up. I guess their value would hypothetically go up because they're on municipal services. I just don't know if what the assessment will go up would be enough to offset our expense of running pipe in there, right? And whether Aquaterra would be the better catalyst to say, hey, we'd sure like to see you guys service this area. But I don't know if it makes sense for them to looping or anything to go to the airport.
Mayor Given?
Yeah, so, so I wonder if Aquaterra's tune has changed, if the last time we looked at this was 2006 in terms of the cost to connect. I wonder what the cost to connect would be today. I know that there's been inflation, but they've also tried to do some right sizing of their connection charges, based on sizes. So I'm just curious, if, and maybe this is actually for Christine, have there been any technical things that have happened, in the way the water systems, are being, has anything changed? Has any of the context changed around this that might make us want to reconsider this policy, to try to, my concern would be, and even if the market's not there, and I trust what Councillor Plot's saying, I would rather see, greenfield vacant land developed, but I would also not want us to be a barrier to development, somebody who saw an opportunity and wanted to, if our reasons from back then aren't valid anymore, or something's changed in Aquaterra, now it's all of a sudden it's $10 to connect. People might have a different opinion. I know it's not $10, but Christine, is there anything that's changed in the other context?
Ms. Donnelly?
Through the chair, I think that Aquaterra would be fine with extending water and sewer. In fact, they did a presentation that we have that they did not that long ago, I think maybe 2013 or something, to the owners in there, and to look at extending it. And so it wasn't just a connection fee like you would on service land elsewhere. It was the connection fee plus the cost to extend that water and sanitary into the area. So it was quite a bit more at the time, because Aquaterra was looking to fund it and then recover that way.
versus the alternative being where the city does initiate the local improvement, or the landowners initiate a local improvement. I would definitely, we took another look at it recently, and I think it would be the businesses need to, if they're interested in increasing their water usage, and they indicated previously if they have more water, they want sanitary. So I think we would need to really go out to those businesses and find out what the interest was to do that, and then if there was an interest to initiate a local improvement with, that 10-year return on it sort of thing, that would be a potential option. But it does provide land that is serviced in a different manner than all the adjacent land, right? So it provides a different type of opportunity.
Just one more, Councillor, if I can. So, Christine, is there does the brochure, the lack of servicing of brochure, does it represent a gap in our system that prevents us or impedes us from extending services beyond the airport? Like, that's the other question I would ask is, now that we have annexed land out there, we have Hughes Lake, ultimately we would want to try to drive services out there. Is there additional rationale for wanting to close that gap in services that brochure represents, or do we have alternate ways around it? Or that's the only other thing that I can think that's changed since then.
Through the chair, previously when we did put that local improvement forward, the sanitary was further away. The sanitary is closer now. The actual cost will have gone down from the previous. That has changed, but there isn't anything from beyond here that would connect to sanitary. This would be the end kind of that sanitary. When we're looking at Hughes Lake, we're not looking to tie in here, and the water's already out to the airport. So again, it's not really holding back anything in that regard.
Okay. I do have Councillor Palat ready to ask questions as well.
Thanks, Chair. I'm curious with this now, and I agree with Christine on that. I don't know if we see anything new from that area. What you might see is some repurposed buildings or additional buildings added on properties if there was better access to water and sewer. I'm just wondering if this is one of those ones, and I know it's kind of out of scope on the bylaw and the policy review committee, but if there was a business case made forward of what it would cost the city to do that would trigger a dividend from Aquaterra if we bought the asset, and then the assessed values all went up on this property, I'm just wondering if there's a business case here for us. It's an area of land that's right beside our airport that should have some high assessed values, and actually, I don't know the exact assessed values, but I feel like they're lower per acre than what they should be. But I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity for the city to get a dividend and to increase assessed values and have more opportunity to densify that area with future outbuildings, if it's worth us looking at investment. But I don't know if that's something we ask engineering to do, or I don't know how that would fit in, or if it's a moot point. I just throwing it out there for some food for thought, because there might be an opportunity for us here too.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Palat. That got me thinking now too. Mayor Given.
Yeah, so I think that's, although the technical, yes, no, go ahead, whatever, is probably outside the scope of bylaw policy review. But the purpose of this committee is to look at stuff that hasn't been looked at for a while and say, hey, do we need to reconsider this? Like, back in 2006 or whenever, the city wasn't regularly considering investments in Aquaterra as a way to increase dividends. Who knows whether there'd be a good business case, but you bring up a good point. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we should be flagging and saying, hey, I don't know if this is refer this to administration to review, change context, or so we're just kind of starting in these, but the idea of saying, hey, there's something here that stuff has changed, and we want to check and see if there's any different way of approaching it that has any value to the city. I think that is the purpose of this committee. I'd be curious to see what, if there was a financial analysis done on it, just like you're talking about, Councillor Plott, what that would yield. Like, maybe it turns out that, no, there's still no money, don't bother. Okay, great. But at least we check that once every 7 years or sorry, every 13 years, excuse me.
So are you suggesting that maybe we forward this particular case, call it a case, to a department in city administration to ask all those questions and come up with some answers and bring it back?
I'd be curious what Horacio would say about how, there's probably I'm thinking about your Class A estimate, Horacio, and so is there an initial sort of scan of this about, well, there is something that's worth further investigation? Rather than expending a huge amount of administrative resources to do a very detailed sort of thing, is there a in between to say, okay, we pulled this off the shelf, we think there might be something different, let's do a little bit of analysis? Like, is there a gradient way to do that?
Yeah, for sure. We can. I'm sure. I don't know if Christine has costs for water and sewer, but that would be easily, accessible to Aquaterra to give us a Class D estimate, I would say, for linear meter for a typical diameter that we may estimate to have enough fire flows for the land use there if it's industrial. I believe we're needing 225 liters per second. Fire flows will be the commanding factor for the design of the system there. Sanitary flows for industrial, they're pretty low. So I'm sure Aquaterra can give us some indication for linear meter for the cost. And then perhaps, I'm thinking now about the stimulus package as well. This could be a potential project we can sweep as part of the full capital plan and what is in the books for a little bit longer in the future. And do a pass this project under our filter and see if we can improve the situation there in terms of water and sewer for the area. That's not gonna it's gonna take a lot of effort, I believe. And Christine, correct me if I'm wrong. Jump at any time, please. Okay, thank you. So I'm not wrong.
Horacio, and I see Danielle. Danielle, I see your name there, and you don't need to respond right now. But as a part of that sort of preliminary, thumb in the air kind of analysis, could we also have a bit of a look at like the, so if we have a cost of putting in services, would it be difficult to run a financial analysis of sort of the return in terms of dividends potential?
No, that wouldn't be a problem at all. Wouldn't be too time consuming at all.
And just could I ask, we were looking for reasons to look for an asset transfer from Aquaterra. Have we found one yet? If hypothetically, if we did do phase 4 of downtown, is there anything else that we have that's going to trigger an assets reallocation? I believe when we looked at this last year, we hadn't done that for a while. So are we looking for an excuse to try to trigger new transfers for the dividends to get our dividend portion up? Because this might be a good excuse, just another kind of food for thought.
Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, Daniel, I don't know if you guys have been analyzing a little bit the assets. I just wanted to comment on the taxation and the changes in the assessed value, but I don't know if Daniel has any comments on the asset transfer.
No, aside from the downtown transfer, we haven't explored any others that could potentially go through Aquaterra. Not at this point in time.
Mayor Given?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd be happy to make a motion to request administration look at this, but you probably need something a little bit more specific. So I'm wondering, Horacio, do you have advice for what kind of motion we could have or direction to administration to review this that would kind of capture some of the things we talked about? I'm not sure that I want to get into itemizing the engineering potential and the cost of service and the dividend, but so how can we give you enough information and emotion, to help you understand what we're looking for back without being overly prescriptive?
Yeah, it could be, a motion to the administration to explore the feasibility of increasing the assessed value. I would think I will capture under that, the configuration of the water and sewer systems, any work related to utilities, anything that would increase the valuation of the land and buildings because of utilities. So yeah, so direct administration to explore the different ways to increase the assessed value on the brochure industrial lands, and we'll take it from there. We know exactly what we need to do. There are several things on the technical side that we need to consider, but the overarching result is that the land within that subdivision will see a change and an increase in assessment because of the completion of the systems for water and sewer and storm. I don't know if we have a storm there, Christine, but we'll just analyze all the utilities.
It's just there. Mayor Given?
Well, so Councillor Palat was also in the queue, but I can try a motion, and then we can kind of see if that's what everybody's thinking. So I'd move that committee direct administration review bylaw C 1167 and the concept of extending utility services to the Brochu Industrial Park for their technical and financial feasibility and merits, period. So again, I'm not being really, really specific, but I'm saying, give us a view of technically, here's what would be required to do, here's generally what it would cost, and here's, the financial impacts of that, cost as well as potential benefits to the whole discussion that we just had. But basically just saying, there's this bylaw that's here, have a bit of a look at the servicing to this area and let us know, what that would look like or what the potential is there.
Okay. Councillor Palat, sorry for not getting you in the queue in right time, but you're here now.
No, that's fine. I was just going to see if I could try to wordsmith the motion, so and we got that happening, so that was all I was going to try to do too.
Okay, excellent. Was there any other concerns, questions regarding the motion that Mayor Given has brought up? Okay, so then Mayor Given?
No, I was just going to say, it looked like Crossy was nodding his head no. If that administration knows what we mean by that and could act on it, then that's great.
Okay, so I'll just call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a good news story, possibly, right? All right. So there was a recommendation for the rest of this information. Does anybody want to make a motion pertaining to that? The remaining items. Don't jump at the gun. There we go. Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Joe. I'll just make a motion that we receive the other ones for information.
Thank you very much. Once again, anybody has any questions, concerns? I see none. All in favor? And that passes unanimous as well. Thank you so much. We will move on to the next item, which happens to be policy 124, bylaw and council policy review. Ms. Karbuszewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a report that has been generated as a result of direction from this committee to administration to draft a policy to ensure the regular review of city bylaws and policies. So we went back and we did some research, and the city has over 200 bylaws and approximately 70 council policies, which they can all be reviewed and found on the city's website. And based on the volume of documents and the work of this particular committee, it would take approximately 5 years for this committee to conduct a review of all of the documents as one cycle at a rate of about 5 documents per monthly meeting. So administration took another look at how we could do a bylaw and policy review in a timeline that's a little more feasible And we broke down the bylaws and the policies into their respective service areas, which also aligns with our current standing committee structure. And by breaking them down into each service area, we could realistically reduce the 5-year timeline for a full review down to approximately 2 years. And this is a little more efficient process if we were to basically break the work up into our standing committees. So based on this information, administration drafted a policy that establishes the mechanism that would ensure a more timely review of bylaws and council policies and this is not my idea, I believe this is Mayor Given's idea, but by adding a standing agenda item to each of our standing committee meeting agendas that then allows for each committee to conduct document review at each committee meeting. So the intent of this policy isn't to stop bylaw and council policy review by the recommendation of disbanding this committee. It's to establish a process that incorporates our current processes that we use with standing committees to do this work. And with that, administration does recommend this committee consider recommending council approve policy 124 and disbanding the bylaw and policy review committee. And I am open to questions.
Okay, Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Cheryl, too. I actually like this idea a lot. I think, thinking now, and I guess, the 4 of us are on this committee. 3 years ago, had the new councillors been part of this process right from the start, I think that they'd all be going through policy and review. Indirectly, this committee is going to do it and then bring it to something. But I do think that if it was right to the committees, I think it would be good. My question is, though, is looking at the list, corporate services has a lot versus, say, an IPS or protective services. So is it realistic to get through Danielle's area with 66 or whatever it was over a 4-year term, for being on corporate services with Councillor O'Toole and Mayor Given the first half of my term? A lot of the times we didn't have lots. Our quarterly statements were busy, but there was a lot of times we were in and out in 5 minutes. So maybe it's a moot point, but I'm just curious if we think breaking into buckets is going to make corporate services and potentially community service or IPS has another big bucket. Are those going to be manageable meetings?
Go ahead, Ms. Karbaczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, in the beginning, if council does choose to accept this process, it could very well look a bit daunting and a little overwhelming for a service area, but there's work that's already happening. Review isn't being neglected, and with this process in place, there will be some more. There is an opportunity for a control measure to be put in place that shows council, the public, and administration the date of a last review. So if in fact, for instance, the brochure bylaw was officially reviewed today, August 11th, 2020, and if in fact we decided not to do anything with that bylaw, it will show that the review occurred. And there might be some bylaws that require a lot of work or none. But the review itself will have occurred, and it will be up to the council to determine what the work of the result of that review is. And in many cases, it could very well be that these bylaws were created 2 years ago and they're good to go. Or these policies were created 2 years ago and they still stand, they still have value. But maybe 1 out of 5 needs some work, or 2 out of 5. It will seem like, wow, there's a lot of documents to review in the beginning, but we will see the workload as a result of the review. I believe we would see that be manageable.
Okay. Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Chair.
And then Mayor Given.
Then for me, I'm a fan of us going back to doing these by committees. One thing I like about committee as well, you have delegates at committees quite often. I'm not saying that we would not let the delegates go first, but delegates are going to realize and be aware that the city has a process of all this stuff. Most people don't care about policy, but I think if people are coming there as delegates, they're actually going to realize we're continually updating and reviewing policies as a municipality too, which I think is really important. This committee is kind of off to the side. I don't know, indirectly it comes to council, but I think for the community and for transparency and for continuity, I think it would be better back at the committee level, which makes sense to me, because I think every councillor then is involved with their bucket, and it gets them really understanding for their 2-year term, if they're on specific committees, it gets them really understanding the policies around that committee. I know when I was on corporate services, there were several times I'm like, man, I'd sure like to take a run at a few of these corporate services policies, and we didn't do it, right? It wasn't the mandate at that time, but I appreciate that administration's doing this, because we just started this and it's kind of 180, but I would be in full support of us trying to go back to it being done by committee. Having said that, I'm sorry, Chair, but I have another Zoom at 3:30. I'm just going to bow out, but vote on that if that makes any difference. I know I can't officially vote, but I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate administration bringing it forward.
Thank you very much. Mayor Given?
Yeah, I agree. One thing that's really changed this term is the amount of delegated authority we've given to administration. And so for, Councillor Toole, you've probably experienced the same thing. It has felt like our committees are doing less. Like it seems like we have a bit lighter committee agendas. And I think that that's a really good thing. Like we've sped things up by allowing administration to just go and do some stuff rather than having to come back and check on council. But it means that there's a bit of a void it means that we have more time to be able to concentrate on governance level issues. And I mean, by definition, city policies are governance. Like council is the only one that can do this. I think that this is actually really upping our game. If we said, the work of committees is to be, part of the work of committees is to be reviewing policies, council policies on an ongoing basis, I think that would be really great. That means that council members would more often be working at a governance level. And I think, just as this is a bit of this is like the ultimate in red tape reduction. We have a committee that worked itself out of a job by finding a more efficient way to do that work on a more, so it's going to be more effective. It's more efficient. Like this is a great example. I see Horacio's thumb, but it's a good example of red tape reduction. Rather than saying we need to create a whole new committee to review policies and create a new system, we said we've got an existing system that has capacity, and so let's build in this work that needs to happen into that system that already exists because there's capacity there. Like this is great. I think this would be really good. I'd be really proud of this. The city has never had a system like this. There have been these ad hoc red tape reduction policy review initiatives, and this would be the establishment of a really good governance practice that would last hopefully for many, many terms. So yeah, I would absolutely support it.
I'm just going to jump in here, Mr. Bressie. I remember when we were talking about forming this committee, I know that this option that we're presenting today was brought up, and it got shot down relatively quick. But now it comes up and it makes sense. So I totally agree. I think we got something here we can brag about, that we're going to be reducing some of the red tape, and you put it in nice words like that. So Mr. Bressie, you got the floor now.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this proposal. I really do think it just makes sense, and it's good governance, and this should be happening. My question, though, is it worth potentially building into the policy, or maybe just giving direction that this pause for the first 6 months or 3 months or whatever of a first council term? And I'm just thinking of a brand new counselor coming in. You hit your first committee meeting, your first council meeting, and you've already got such a fire hose of information. It's
We've got a frozen Dylan.
I was just a Dairy Queen, and so maybe we got a dilly bar, a frozen Dylan.
Yeah, we got a Councillor Dilly Bar.
So can I pick up where Dylan froze?
Absolutely, please do.
You know, I think he makes a good point that I don't know if we need to say it in the policy, but the very first committee meetings, he's going to restart maybe. The very first committee meetings might be a difficult one to hit new councils with while they're still getting acclimatized. And I don't know whether we would specify in the policy that, you know, that this is initiated in the January after an election, or, you know, maybe we don't need to be like, you know, that specific, or maybe we do. But that might be a reasonable thing to say, you know, there's the election in October, the standing item doesn't start to appear until the January after the election, so that, you know, you've got 3 months to get your feet underneath you before policy reviews start showing up at committee. Or, you know, or we just say that's just the job and that's what you get elected to do, and so you have to start at the start. You know, I'm curious what you think, Councillor Toole, you know, or Frostio.
Yeah, I'll just butt in here. I think that depending on the council, whether there's a lot of new councillors on board, or if it's a number of ones that have been elected before, that could change the outlook of what we're thinking. And I think that that would be something that maybe administration want to implement after the election to see where we should place that. I totally understand the reason of maybe starting February of the following year, or start right away. Both of them are going to be a shock, because part of this review is looking at history and how history changed to where it's at now. And so I do appreciate Mr. Bressie for bringing it up. And I appreciate your input there, Mayor Gibbon, too. So I think we all are similar in the way of thinking. It's just the way of when we're going to implement it.
Dylan, did you get to make your point there? We thought you were going to say that, you know, is it too much right off the bat in a term? And we kind of said, well, maybe it could be held off until, you know, till January of the, you know, that follows the election. Is that kind of where you were going?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, both for the sake of, for the councillors coming on board, give them a bit of time to get up to speed before you add some non-urgent things to them, but also for the sake of administration. I mean, frankly, get too many councillors like myself and councillor who come in really keen off the good, and I'm really nervous that before the council understands the that's in the city, that they end up creating a bunch of red tape by saying, hey, we're going to open up every single policy and every single byline. I know that I don't think I would have served our community well by doing these policy reviews the first month or two of the term till I understood more what was going on.
So, Councillor Toole, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at the policy itself on page 3 of the policy, where it talks about the bylaw and council policy review process. The second line there says the standing agenda item, bylaw and policy review will be included on each standing committee agenda. We could do exactly what we're talking about by saying beginning in the January immediately following a municipal election. Because that would, you know, then it's specific in this policy that says, you know, that council begins that process, that ongoing process of reviewing January after an election, rather than, you know, and so it's not, you know, October 30th committee meeting that starts to have policy review. It'll be your January 5th council committee meeting that will start to have policy review. And if some future council wanted to change that, they could, but it's, yeah, what do you guys think of that? I'd be happy to make that motion. I see her.
Mr. Galante, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So it depends, how many new members of council, right?
Yeah.
If we have the same council, then we can continue because everybody is familiar with that. However, if we have a significant, change in council members, 3 months, I would say, is a minimum. There's a lot of information to be digested at the beginning. We're going through budget in November, orientation. So maybe if we were to clause with some flexibility up to council to decide. If it's the same council, everybody is familiar, we continue. If there are a lot of new members, then there is some word in there to stop for until January or so.
Could we change it to say the beginning of these or introduction to these would start no less than 90 days after the election? Or, 90 days after council has been sworn in. That way there's not really a timeline date, but there's a timeline when it needs to be started. So we could, if we had a good returning council in the future, then it could start quite early. And if it happens to be a number of first timers, then we would have more time to process and stuff like that. What does everybody think about that? Does that make sense? Dylan, you good with that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent on how we do it as long as we give some of that time.
Arlene had her hand up, Councilor O'Toole.
Yeah, Arlene, Ms. Karbuszewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the wording itself, I think, is it aligns either way with the idea that we won't start the review until the following January. And there is also another avenue where if in January our council doesn't feel comfortable conducting any kind of a review, those items we can just simply postpone using the standing agenda item until the council is comfortable. And on the reverse of that, if a council in fact is quite comfortable at beginning the review early, they can direct administration to initiate the review prior to January, just by a simple motion at the standing committee level or even at council level. So there's some flexibility there.
So just going to butt in, Mayor Gibbon. Is there a possibility that we could stagger the committees, that one would start and maybe one would not, depending on the makeup of the committee? Is that something that? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think Councilor O'Toole, you had really good phrasing there on that suggestion. That and doing it as a no later than is really good, because that gives flexibility to start sooner if you want, right? But it means that you can't go beyond this point, so you're no later than. So in that one, it could say that that line could start no later than 90 days following the swearing in of a new council, comma, the standing agenda item, bylaw, and policy review will be included on each standing committee agenda. So if you put your part at the first, at the start of that sentence, it says, you within 90 days you must start. You can start sooner, but you can't push it to 120 days or 180 days without actually being really intentional about saying, no, we're not ready to do that yet. It will automatically start within 90 days. And so I think that's really good. And yeah. So I'll move that, I'll move that amendment. And then if somebody else, I don't know, Dylan, if you want to get on the score sheet and move the amended version of the policy. But I'm happy I'm happy to either make a motion to recommend council approve it with that amendment, or to make the amendment and Councillor Bressie can approve it, either way. Or is Dylan frozen again?
Oh, he's concentrating really hard, it looks like.
He's so intense and he concentrates so much that it's hard to tell the difference.
Yeah. Wish I had a screenshot of that. He looks like he's giving the evil eye to somebody.
Okay, so since he's not here, and it's down to you, Councillor Toole. So I would move that the committee recommend council approve policy 124 with the amendment as discussed. And Arlene, I just, I think I trust you to capture that.
You're back in, Mr. Bressie?
Yes, my apologies.
No, just hang on. We've got a motion on the table. I'm going to get Ms. Karbaszewski to read it out again, and then we'll start from there. Ms. Karbaszewski, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the motion on the table is moved by Mayor Gibbon. Committee recommend council approve policy 124, being the bylaw and policy review policy, with the amendment to insert no later than 90 days following the swearing in of a new council in front of the standing agenda item bylaw and council policy review will be included on each standing committee meeting agenda.
Okay, sounds good. Any discussion? I see none. Then all in favor?
Thank you.
That's unanimous. And we're good?
Well, it's been good serving with y'all.
Yeah. You know you're good when you work yourself out of a job.
I was just going to say, yeah, Councillor O'Toole, you're the most effective bylaw and policy review committee chair ever, because you have come up with the one policy to rule them all, and you've worked yourself out of a job. Well done.
Yeah, they're going to call me no red tape. So we do have Ms. Karbaszewski. Go ahead.
Well, just before we leave this item, Mayor Gibbon, was it your intention to keep point 2 within your motion to disband this committee?
If somebody else wanted to make that motion, maybe Dylan, I don't know if you want to make one so you're on the score sheet, and then, but also that it was that we're all in agreement that that's the right course of action rather than just being me behind everyone.
Are you awake?
Just killing me. And I don't think there's anything else contentious being talked about, so I think I'm just going to bow out rather than distracting the meeting with my internet coming and going, since I don't know if there's much else I can contribute. But
just hold on a second before you leave. Do you want to make the vote to disband this committee?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. No, I want to make that motion. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I would move that.
I'd move that committee recommends council that the bylaw and policy review committee be disbanded, and thanks for its hard work.
Thank you. All in favor? And that's done. So we have one more item, and that is the outstanding items list.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. The outstanding items list, I believe, is moot as we have disbanded this committee.
There you go. Mr. Galante?
Okay, just to say, Councillor O'Toole, you can use the continuous improvement app as a just do it because of the, the finalization of this committee. I think it's a good one to say, we worked through this, we found a different way, probably more efficient to do it, and we can calculate some numerical info to give you, but you can input that into the app. If you haven't downloaded it, I will show you how to do it, and will be a good contribution from a council and this team. There is a there's a section you press, this is a team effort. So we can mention the members of this committee and a brief description about what happened, and we're going to capture this in our continuous improvement system.
Looking forward to making that app on my phone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Given?
Thanks, Councilor O'Toole. I just wanted to check to see 1082, the parks bylaws and policies. So it says to bring to council for approval. Will we just, that's about the only one that sort of seems like there was work that wasn't a part of ongoing work of this committee. Has that happened? Was it going to happen? Didn't have an expected report date. So can we even just transfer that to somewhere else, maybe to the appropriate standing committee? Now that's just, where do we make sure we don't lose that one, 1082?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, work is actively being done on these, and they are on administration's own outstanding items list to be brought forward. But if it's this committee's wish, we can transfer this to the appropriate outstanding items list for the standing committee, for which it will report.
I'm going to suggest we just find the appropriate outstanding items list on another committee and send it that way, and then it doesn't get lost.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So I'd move that we receive the updates to the outstanding items list as presented and refer item 1082 to the appropriate standing committee.
All in favor? And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a wrap, it's been sliced, and it's been a Zoom. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks everybody.
Social distance and wash your hands.